This clip right here shows exactly why young men are struggling more than ever and shutting down. Hey guys, it's Daniel, licensed therapist. I'll tell you the moment I realized things were bad for men. I was in session with a client who was an actor. He was talking about the industry and how it was really getting tough for him because he was a straight white guy. And I remember having the thought, wow, I'm glad at least I'm not white. Hey, look, I've always been proud to be Asian, but it's pretty messed up when you think I'm happy to not be white. Today, we're going to check out this clip from Chris Williamson, who's on the Joe Rogan podcast, and they were talking about the struggles facing young men. And at the end, I will give you the magic psychological solution. But if you like this kind of stuff, please help out your guy and consider liking and subscribing. Let's get on with it.
It's interesting to think about you mentioned earlier on about going to the gym is right wing and liking fast cars is right wing and all the rest of it. The number of liberal women that are struggling, I think, to find an eligible partner is going up because they just can't find a guy that'll hold the door open for them, that'll treat them like a lady, that'll try and be the protector, provider, procreator thing. You go, you're talking about a conservative. You're talking about somebody who's more traditional in that way. And I get worried, I sort of talk a lot about this stuff on the show, and I get worried about not helping men to improve in this sort of zero-sum view of empathy, that if you give some attention to men and the way that they're struggling, that it takes it away from some other more deserving group. So a lot of the time, if someone's falling behind, 50 years ago, Title IX gets introduced, right, for women. There's not enough women in higher education. There's not enough women expediting them through socioeconomic status. 50 years later, they've blown the roof off the glass ceiling. It doesn't exist. 2 women for every 1 man completing a 4-year US college degree by 2030. Women earn way more than men do in their 20s, way more. And now, it's going to be difficult for you to find an eligible partner as you begin to climb up your own socioeconomic ladder, as you get higher and higher up. You look across and there are fewer and fewer men over there.
Okay, not only are there fewer and fewer men for high achieving women, but if you think about it, from a man's point of view, there's fewer and fewer women. Basically, the women have priced themselves out of the dating marketplace. So dating's rough. Not only are men expected to earn much more than a woman, but he's also expected to be a manly man, even though manly behavior is being discouraged because you can be seen as toxic and you could be canceled. You are expected to be masculine, but if you approach a girl and she doesn't like it, that you can get me too'd into oblivion and your life will be over. It's rough. So we have dating, we have culture, and Chris also mentions education and financial disadvantages when it comes to men. So all of this really sucks. But what are you going to do? You're going to give up? You're going to curl up in the corner and die? You're just going to accept your fate? You're going to cry? Or you're going to complain?
No, God! No, God, please, no! 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 No!
Look, guys, difficult times can be such an opportunity. Is it fun? No, it's not. But this can cause men to rise up because honestly, the situation isn't so bad that there isn't a psychological solution. Hey, look, if we're talking about classic American slavery here, there's not enough therapy, affirmations, and mental gymnastics in the world that's going to get you out of that. But I look at the situation with men today and I'm thinking the individual can overcome this. Let's keep going.
And what you think is, okay, well, typically, if a group is falling behind in society, we don't tell them to pick themselves up by their bootstraps. We spend billions of money in taxpayer-funded charities and think tanks to try and work out what's going on and to try and bring them along for the ride. That's not happening with men because vestigially for so long, men had it so good. Yeah. And now it feels like twisting the knife in some sort of karmic retribution in a way. Like this is penance that you're paying. But a lot of guys, you can look at the number of CEOs and sure, guys that outperform on the top end, yep. But that's not necessarily due to privilege. It's because putting yourself in that position to do what you need to do to get yourself to the position of being a founder, being a CEO, running a successful company is so fucking insane that most women would just choose to not go and do that. You're talking about outliers. Evolutionary psychology says that men are nature's playthings, that there's more variability. There's more male geniuses, but there's also more male retards. And it's all well and good pointing to the number of CEOs and Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk and all the rest of it. That doesn't help the guy who is really struggling and has had that run of bad luck and has been really struggling, trying to work on himself. And if women have a problem, a lot of the time we say, what can we do to fix society? Any other group. But if men are struggling, we say, what is it that men are doing where they can't fix themselves?
Yeah.
And in some ways that's inspiring. Like, guys want that sense of like, I can fucking do this. I can do this. But it denies that there's structural problems. I think the education system for young boys is really, really tough. Getting them to sit in a classroom for 6 hours a day. It seems like females are just better at doing that. Young girls are more effective at a sort of brain-based economy, highlighting and planning ahead of the homework that they've got to do and the assignments and stuff like that. And you just roll that forward. 2 women for every 1 man completing a 4-year US college degree. And I'm not saying, let's rip women out of the classroom and out of the boardroom and put them back into the kitchen. Like, obviously not. Obviously, that's not what either of us are saying.
I don't think there's any doubt that society has made this shift to naturally favor women. And with all this talk about the patriarchy, I think there just might have been a little bit of an overcorrection. Okay, a huge overcorrection. So there are these powerful societal forces that are influencing the psychology of young men out there. And whenever I start to analyze a client, I'm looking at the environment and I think about the messages that the environment is sending them. At the very best, for young men, I'm thinking that they're getting the message that they're not important and that the world doesn't care about them. And at the very worst, I'm thinking that the message is that they are evil. And what do you think is the psychological result of that? Well, Chris here is saying that there are some people who can say, I can do this, I want to do this. But let me tell you, that is so rare. Usually people go with the current of the messaging. To go counter to the messaging would require either a very good childhood where that kind of thinking was modeled or cultivated, or someone would just happen to be born super psychologically strong. So we're looking at feeling neglect, alienation, antagonism, which breeds disempowerment. And that would result in either withering away or, more dangerously, people finding creative and potentially harmful ways to get that power.
What do you think is the cause of it? Like, what do you think is the reason why more men aren't succeeding and getting college degrees and more men aren't going out and making as much money in their 20s?
I think that the current environment does not necessarily lend itself to the disposition that men have got. So they're less conscientious than women from a personality standpoint on average. That means that it's really difficult, comparatively, on average, for you to be able to remind yourself that you need to do the sort of homework. Men are more predisposed to addiction. They're more predisposed to using recreational drugs. They're more predisposed to being in jail, to all of the sort of gang stuff that people get drawn into. It's just more likely for guys. There are more routes that men can be pulled away in that sort of a manner. And on top of it, I don't think that there is a particularly inspiring vision for what men is. But you said earlier on about fitness right wing, fast cars right wing. There was this thread on Reddit, I think, in a left-leaning forum that said, people of the left, can you give me a good example of who you think a positive male role model would be? And the top voted one was Aragorn from Lord of the Rings.
What about Fabio?
You've had to go to a fantasy land
Right.
in order to be able to find somebody who's sufficiently pure.
I love Lord of the Rings, and Aragorn is awesome. But nice job, left. According to Chris here, shifted the culture to basically screw over the young man. And he is giving this cultural reason for the shift. So naturally a solution would be cultural, it would be political or sociological. But that stuff takes a long time to change. Years, maybe even decades.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
Fortunately, for young men, there's a faster way. You can change things today by yourself, right now. Let me tell you one psychological trait that would address the problem. If all young men had heaps of this particular trait, then what messaging, the culture, education system, or the dating marketplace tells us. And that trait is grit. What is grit? Well, let's hear it from the queen of grit herself, Angela Duckworth.
One characteristic emerged as a significant predictor of success. And it wasn't social intelligence, it wasn't good looks, physical health, and it wasn't IQ. It was grit. Grit is passion and perseverance for very long-term goals. Grit is having stamina. Grit is sticking with your future, day in, day out, not just for the week, not just for the month, but for years, and working really hard to make that future a reality.
So what does that practically look like? Well, let me paint a picture for you. You're in the UFC and you are fighting in a championship fight. And at the end of the round, you tear your groin. So the deck is stacked against you. And your coach says this.
I pulled my groin. I don't care. I don't care, George. Hey, look at me. This is where champions are made. You understand me? Yeah. Nothing matters now. Hit him with your groin.
Hit him with your groin. I love this moment because you can clearly see George here. His mind is heading toward dread and despair. But the coach, Coach Jackson, heads it off and replaces that mentality with one that refuses to quit. And that is, in my opinion, such a good example of grit. So young men, get out there, hit him with your groin. Not literally. All right, guys, those are my thoughts. What are yours? I would love to hear in the comments down there. If you have anything you want me to react to, please leave it in the comments as well. I love you guys. See you next time.